Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And yeah, I don't have a too lot to say going into this one, but we have a lot to do, many things to launch. We're trying to get through a lot of contracts before I start unveiling some new launchers, so let's get right to it. Preparing for liftoff is a Surveyor 3 in 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff of the Surveyor 3 spacecraft, which is heading up to land upon the moon's surface. So yes, indeed, we have another lunar lander for another lunar lander contract. So we are heading up into a nice, tight, low Earth orbit, and then from there we will be moving on to the moon. And I have made sure this time that the sun will be there when we arrive. So we are not going to have to worry about that dark time landing. We are going to be able to see where we're going. We're going to have power to our solar panels, the whole thing. And this gets so darn close to not actually making it that it's troubling. But yeah, it's made it every time that I've launched one of these, but I think it's probably almost time for me to start working on new launchers. I actually have in the works, I've mentioned, I think, an analog to the Atlas Centaur, which is just a venerable launcher that has done like a lot of work for the US space program. But I also have built like half of one. So there is a type of Delta rocket that used a single RL-10 as an upper stage, and I couldn't find that was actually something that was ever used. Like there's some things in like designation systems and some other places will talk about how there was a Delta K cryogenic version that was going to be, that was going to get into using cryogenic RL-10 for its upper stage, but I can't find any evidence that one actually ever flew, or that an RL-10 was ever used like alone. But that may be just my Google Foo not working very well. But in any case, I've discovered that works freaking fantastic to have a basically a Delta rocket that is RS-27 and then an RL-10, and that's that accidental Delta 3. I'll talk more about that when we get to it. That's a whole other misunderstanding that I had. But long way to say that I found that a Tela with a single RL-10 as an upper stage works just so good. So that's something that we will be playing with a little bit later on, and that's something that I can do when I don't want to go as far as the full Centaur double RL-10 whatever, because it provides quite like a pretty decent amount of thrust and lots of Delta V. So yeah, it's pretty darn good. So okay, we are now in our good orbit, or at least good enough. I'm going to disengage, turn this off. That's fine. There we go. Everything is looking fantastic so far. All right, so this is the trajectory that we've kind of come up with. We are apparently going to be landing at Mare Imbrium, and I don't really care which Mare we land in, so long as it's not the same one as Surveyor 2, and that we have good coverage of sunlight and are also within the and so long as we have the ability to see Earth from where we are. So we may want to push this in a little bit once we get the burn. We're not going to be able to fix that up yet now. That's just a kind of rough target. So we are going to make that happen, and then I will tweak it with RCS to get exactly where we want to be. So we'll just go ahead and execute next node, actually. And we have a good ignition, second ignition of our Agena D upper stage, and we are on our way. Fabulous. So we can just go ahead and start time warping a little bit through that. And when we are a little bit closer, once this node is finished, then we will worry about fixing up the orbit, like I said. All right, so we are just about finished up with our lunar injection burn, which messed up a bit because I was still time warping. I thought that I had turn that down, but I guess not. So that's pretty darn off, but that, you know, whatever. We can fix this with HTTP, I think. And see, there we go. But yeah, we want to make sure that we are actually landing in the place where I think we're landing. Shoop. Yep. So we want to make sure that, there we go. Yeah, so we're landing there, which is still, that should have good good line of sight and plenty of sun. Although yeah, because this puts us on the lowlands, and I like the idea of landing in Mare Imbrium. Like I said, I don't actually know what that is, but I do want something that's a little bit more getting into unique biomes like these mare is better, I think, for science than landing on something as easy to get to as the lowlands. Yeah, so this actually looks pretty good. So now, let's go ahead and we'll point ourselves sunward and turn off this, and then we will turn off this, oh, shoot. Oh, I know what I did. Okay. So, okay. This is a near-Earth avionics, not deep space avionics, which is not great for what I was trying to do. This was specifically deep space avionics so that I could point us at the sun and then point us back at the node before we get to our location. But I recently went through and very helpfully cleaned up all of my KLV sub-assemblies. So I had all of my launchers all set up very nicely so that I could very easily attach them to various spacecraft that I'm building and not have to worry about if the configurations were correct, if they've all been upgraded to interplanetary avionics, that sort of thing. So I did that, and then I forgot that this one was actually a very special case that I had set to deep space avionics and not near Earth. So that's cool. What can I do? Okay, so I think I have to do a dicey thing that I told you last time I tried this mission that I was not good enough to actually make happen. So I guess we'll see. But what I'm going to do is right here, which just to confirm, yep, that is on the way in. Right here, right before impact, we are going to spend all of our delta V, right? So 2,400 meters per second of delta V in the retrograde vector. That's what we expect to do. So that gives us the exact, oh dear, that is really moving around when I turn on my thrusters. But that, I don't think that's too important. Yeah, we're still landing in Mare Imbrium, so I think this is okay. Just the orientation is what's important here. So if I place that maneuver node right there, that should tell us, even different from, that should tell us, even with the effects of gravity and everything else, exactly what the orientation for canceling out all of our delta V will be right here, right above the surface. Oh, look at that. At like 4,000, yeah, 4,000 meters above the surface. Please point towards a node. And yeah, just every time I activate these jets, it's changing my vector or my trajectory a little bit, which is not awesome. So I'll have to try to fix that, I guess. Well, I'm not 100% sure how I do. So yeah, gosh. So what I can do then is if I just point here. Okay, so pointing there, I don't think it actually matters too much. I think we're on it, maybe. Now we're on it. Yes, okay. So that's the trajectory. Like that's the orientation, just like this. And it actually has sun on it, which is perfect. So I'm really glad that I waited till when I did. So I'm going to have to do the thing where now that we have this node spun up, or this node set up, we are going to spin up our craft. So I'm going to turn this off. We actually don't need, well, let's leave that node now just to kind of test ourselves. And we are just going to spin up and do everything that we were going to do previously. I'm going to put this here so that we have our RCS when we make the stage. And so now we are just about spun up pretty good. So this should hopefully give us some good control. And because, I mean, I just know this to be true, but yeah, we have about 12 hours of power left, even in almost full sunlight here. So this was definitely going to not make it if I were to leave this as is, because it's 4 days to the moon, 4 days and a half. So we are going to have to do this. So a little bit more spin, and there we go. And even with I have no control from the what do you call it? No connection. But if I have connection, which I do now, I should be able to, yes, okay, so I can still press H and N to translate forward and backwards with my RCS thrusters, even if I have no avionics control, which I won't even if I turn this on right now, because this craft weighs more. That was the whole point. This craft weighs more than this is able to control. So in theory, I've done all the things that I was going to do with this lower stage, and we have perpetual power because we are pointed in the direction, roughly, not quite, we're a little bit off, but we're roughly in the right direction. Oh yeah, we are precessing a bit. That will allow us to do most of our braking, and then we are going to get a chance to stage this off and then get control and then finish our landing burn and all that. So that's all the things that we were going to do with this, which was pointing, spinning, and decoupling. The only thing that it's not going to let us do is ullage, which we can do with our RCS on this. So theoretically, this should work. I guess we're about to find out. So we are heading off to the moon now. We are approaching. I've got my nav ball closed because it is spinning madly. And all I can do right now is hope against hope that we are not precessing so madly that we are not going to be on our node when we get to the moon. Because we have power, which is the fatal flaw in this mission. But now it's just a matter of whether or not we will be able to brake properly. God, that is very disorienting. We'll close that. Oh, man. Okay, so let's see. What do we got here? All right, so we are coming in. We are just 11 hours until impact at this point, and spinning madly around, which is probably not super fun to look at, but the nav ball is even worse. So yeah, I think like maybe 30 seconds above the surface is when I'm going to try to light it up, because it's a little bit off, because when we were dead on the proper vector, it took about 25 seconds, but we are precessing a little bit around it this time. So I think we are going to go for 30 seconds. 2 hours. 1 hour. Let's slow it on down just a little bit. Oh man, look at that. Okay, so we're looking pretty good so far. I think I'm pointed in just about the right direction, but it's really just going to be a matter of how well aligned we are and how close we are to that marker that we are able to, that we did all the way back at Earth. And this is the kind of thing that, you know, that NASA gets into. Like they make plans like this, and they have to trust the engineering and the math and everything else that was correct. So that's something that I find kind of terrifying. Like because I don't plan all that well. I wind up liking to have control all the way down so I can just make changes on the fly. But yeah, we are 7 minutes up, and the plans and trajectory and burn that we made and the orientation spin and everything else that we did in low Earth orbit has carried us all the way to the moon, and we are just about on there. So this is pretty darn good so far. So we are going to light up the RCS at about 40 seconds so that we are ready to light up our engine at 30 seconds before impact. And hopefully that will allow us to land in Mare Imbrium. All right, so I am... Okay. Oh man, my palms are sweating. All right, okay, here we go. So 43 seconds to go. And like I said, we are going to ullage up, and in just a couple of seconds, here we go. And we are ready. Throttle up and fire the engine. Okay, so now hopefully this will, because you see we are off a little bit of what the actual node is going to be. We're both off of the surface retrograde and off of the node that we plotted from orbit. So a little bit of extra lead time. I think it was 25 seconds that we did the first time that we were successful in this. So we are just going to be hopeful that this works out. Okay, we are, and once again, we are trying to just cut all of our vertical speed a little bit more, and the node can go away at this point. Oof, I don't love this at all. Okay, so there we go. We actually burned out the entire stage, and we are flying forward a bit now, which is not super awesome, and we are 13 kilometers up. I think this may not work, but I guess we'll see. So let's go ahead and turn on our avionics and prepare ourselves for the final burn and see how much speed we pick up in the last 10 kilometers. And fire the engines. Our surface speed is about 200 meters per second, so theoretically this should work. That can go away. All right, we are cutting velocity. Time to impact about 15 seconds. Did you hear that? I think I heard the dull rumble of one of my other stages smashing into the ground. 10 seconds to impact. 8, 7. We're looking good so far. We are 200 meters above the surface, 20 meters per second. And we are reorienting to point directly up. Slowing down. And we have touchdown. We did it. Yes. Okay, so I am apparently, well, I'm not going to say I'm better at this than I thought because this came from a lack of planning to begin with, but we were able to pull off that really complicated, oh my God, we were able to pull off that maneuver where we did everything in low Earth orbit and then fired it off and then did everything in advance without having to have control right to the last minute and use a deep space probe. Like, we did the thing, and I'm pretty sure I never would have actually tried it if I hadn't forced myself to accidentally by forgetting to put deep space avionics on that probe. So here we have it. We have a surveyor probe on the surface of the moon, and look at how gorgeous this is. Just look at how absolutely fantastic this looks. It's not just a stretched, solid, flat texture as far as the eye can see. You can see individual rocks and boulders. You can see the soil that we are sampling even as we speak to get more science. Oh man, okay, so we did it. Did I tell me I got the contract? Transmit science from the surface of the moon. Okay, well that might take a minute. Let's see, what do we have? Everything's running, so we just need to leave it a little bit of time and we should be able to get it. And we have 22 hours of power on here with all of the experiments running, but thankfully that's not always, not all of this, all of the stuff is going to be running all of the time. And also that counted the avionics, which I'm never going to need again, so I can turn that off. And we have 100 days of power, even with all of the all of the stuff running. So what I'm going to do, though, is when the power is low, I am going to turn everything off. And when the power is high, we'll turn it back on. And that is with the vague idea that maybe we will be able to survive a lunar night. I don't know if the solar panels will survive that long, like about a month outside of, what do you call it? A month out of any solar power at all. We'll see how long these stay up and running. Like after 4 days, 4.5 days, they're at 9% wear, so I'm not sure they're going to last through an entire lunar night. But that's not super important. We have a long bit of day. We are on the side that is going to be in the daylight for a little bit longer because the sun will be moving across this way. So we will have a good amount of time to gather and send back science. And there's only a couple experiments, if you look, that take any amount of time, really. So these are all like 1 minute, 20 minutes, 6 minutes, 2 hours, and then it's the magnetic scan is the long one. And so that will run for 30 days, and hopefully we will get a bunch of science out of that over a long period of time. So yeah, just warp it forward. We can see telemetry analysis, temperature scan, pressure scan. Oh, there's 10 to the -7 pascals pressure on the moon here. Visible imaging, so we're sending back pictures and video. Another hour and a half, and we'll get one more thing. Mass spectrometry data from moon-landed Mare Imbrium. So, fabulous. So we have sent back 123 credits of science, which is just fantastic. We will be working on our magnetic scan over the next month, and if that works, then great, and if not, it's fine. But I just want to flag again that I did that with 7 meters per second of fuel remaining. I had 0.68 units of hydrazine. So that was really close. I probably should have been watching my fuel a little bit closer at the last minute there. Like when we got down to 20 meters per second, I assumed like, oh no, we've made it. It's all fine. It's all perfect. But I should have been watching that a little bit closer, but this time it worked out just fine. So we've done it. Surveyor landed on the moon. All right, and so back we are with 148 additional science and the Research and Development Center being upgraded in just 21 days, immediately before we get to enter into Venus's orbit with Intrepid 5. So we're going to save our science points for after we get this unlock, but I do want to spend some of the upgrades that we got. So that's an important thing that someone has pointed out to me, one of the developers. When you are at a certain point in your game, you are going to end up shifting a little bit, where you were spending most of your money on upgrades to the... Oh, by the way, contract complete, mission success. You have safely landed on the moon and returned valuable science data from the surface. We now know that it is possible for a crewed craft to land there safely as well. We found that out again, I suppose, which is good. And also good to the tune of 200,000 funds. But anyways, you get to a point where you are spending very little money on KCT upgrade points and spending it mostly on the stuff that I'm spending it on myself, which is freaking unlocks and new engine configs and tooling and upgrades to facilities. All that is costing me a ton of money, but we did get 6 points from all the science we just collected. So I'm told that in the future you can expect that there is kind of a tipping point where you end up spending the vast majority of your KCD points based on just the science you collect more than anything else. So we will be getting science more and more and faster as we go, which is fantastic. And let's science faster. 6 more points into science because we really want to get that moving. Another thing that we want to get moving is the math has changed. So I have 170 points in the VAB, and the math that I'd been using for the upgrade to the vehicle assembly building itself was always that at 1 million funds, it would be 200. You got diminishing returns from upgrading the facility until you had 200 points in the VAB. By that point, you would get more efficacy out of your money by spending it on the vehicle assembly building upgrade compared to spending it just on more points. And now, in the recent update, the vehicle assembly building is cheaper by a pretty huge amount, by 35%. So that changes the math a little bit, and I think means that I'm ready to get this upgrade, whenever I have 650,000 extra funds laying about, which will be great because I would love to have another construction line where I could have 2 rockets producing at similar speeds, and or even have one producing at slower speeds, so I can just keep cranking away on little satellite launchers, but I can also move my big rockets on the main production line. So yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. That changes our plans a little bit, not by a huge amount, but at least some. So I am going to warp us to the end. Oops, Surveyor 3 is out of electric charge. We no longer have control. Well, that was fast. Surveyor 3, I don't actually need you to tell me when you do and don't have battery anymore. Thank you very much. Whatever Kerbalism says is happening to you is no longer something I'm concerned about. Here it comes. The Research and Development Facility. Oh no, it's actually after Intrepid 5. Well, that's fine. Let's go do that first. Hello again, gorgeous. We are here in the sphere of influence of Venus. Yes, indeed. And something that I wanted to check, because I did that again with this thing where I was using SAS and RCS and everything else to maintain orientation with the sun. And I would just like you to know that coming out of time warp, all the way hundreds of days from when we started, we are still pointed at the sun. Perfectly. So that works exactly like it says that it would, which is good because it doesn't look like it does anything because, it acts over a very long period of time. So it's easy to kind of lose track. But yeah, here we freaking are. We are not in orbit. We are around Venus or near Venus. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snap a node to the perigee of the parasite of my orbit, or flyby trajectory, and then we are just going to type in 1698 negative prograde on that vector, because that is how much the Altair is going to be able to put out. And theoretically, that will get us into a very good orbit that is not even all that high. But we need to orient ourselves in that direction, so we are going to do that, and then I'm going to just make sure that our orbit starts where I want it to start, because I want to make sure that we are not dipping too low. We do not want to touch the atmosphere because it will probably kill us all. 255 kilometers, I think that's probably fine, right? So there you have it. So that is what the plan is on this. We are going to kind of execute the node manually. Because we are definitely going to be behind the planet between here and Earth. Like, we are not going to have line of sight to Earth from this point. We are going to be piercing through the thick, soupy atmosphere of Venus for that. So the thing that I'm worried about is I'm worried about having MechJeb execute my node when I haven't staged this correctly. I've just moved this up, so I'm not 100% sure it's going to know to stage this properly. Well, let's just see what happens. So we are going to be warping our way in. We are heading down. Yes, the research and development is indeed finished. Where is it? Oh gosh. Okay, there's Venus. Here we are. We are approaching once again. And this time, hopefully, into a good orbit. And the moral of the story for this one is that it's not nearly as hard to get into orbit around Venus as you might expect. So I just went in and I clicked apply on the Eve cloud manager, and that seems to fix it when the clouds are weird and buggy. Okay, so it's trying to... Okay. And we have good ignition on the Altair 2 upper stage, which is pushing us down from a screaming fast 11 kilometers a second down to a much more reasonable upper 9,000 meter per second or something. And there we go. That's it. We did it, I think. We did it. We are there. We are in orbit around Venus for the very first time. Contract complete. We can continue to gather data from our new satellite, because that is indeed what this is. This is a satellite around Venus. So we will stage off. I said we will stage off. Go away. Get off of me. And darn thing's stuck. Okay, there we go. So there we go. Now we have our good probe that is here around Venus and able to, well, once we get back to the higher orbit and we get connection with Earth, should have Earthrise here any minute now. Oh, there we go. That's Mars. There it is. There's Earth. There it is. That little tiny dot there is what we are communicating home with, and what we are about. So we're going to turn off Smartass, and we are going to once again use persistent rotation to activate our rotation towards the sun. Is this actually like right now pointing us, or is it just... No, it's just fussing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Smartass get us there, and then I'm going to have persistent rotation hold us there. I think is the right move. Nope, the sun is down for this vessel. Nope, I was right the first time. Darn it. Okay. Anyways, so we are pointing in the correct direction, and you can see now that just the power of these little solar panels. These are not very large, but okay. So off. No, we're still rotating slightly. Stop that. Okay, stopped and off, and SAS on. Activate relative rotation towards the sun and go away. And that can go away as well. Okay, so yeah, with just these tiny little solar panel wings, we are getting just a tremendous amount of power compared to the giant wings that we need for our Mars mission. And we're using the same dish because we are roughly the same distance between here and Earth for communications purposes. And we have just about the same science and all that. There's nothing super interesting that we have on here that we didn't have before. Low and high and whatever, and then we're going to be getting lots of this long-term science stuff around biomes and etc. every time we make a low pass around Venus, which we have done. All right, and while we were gone, the research and development facility upgraded as well, so we now have a nice-looking R&D center that goes a little bit faster. And between that and all the extra points I'm sure we got one more anyway, so we'll put that also into the R&D. Means that we are researching tech much faster. Yes, everything is down to just even the biggest ones are about 112 days, and the ones that are shorter are obviously shorter yet. And that gives us the ability to go a little bit further into the future. Not much, but a little bit. It gets us into some early Apollo era stuff. Like lunar orbiter capsules, of which there are none, but that is something required to get us to mature capsules and space station prototypes. Oh man! Oh shoot! Look at that. The Gemini flight. Oh, that's for the winged Gemini. Okay, I wondered why there was a piece of the Gemini up here in the space planes node, but there's a freaking pair of wings that you can get. Which was actually a thing. So yeah, maybe I'll talk about that someday. But so, oof, man, so many things now. Lunar rated heat shields is way up there in my in my priority list, because not only because it's on the way towards lunar landing and all sorts of other interesting lunar modules. It has lunar rated heat shields, which are like, there's no, how to put it, there doesn't seem to be another tier of heat shield ever. Everything else is just a matter of getting into a better orbit to begin with, rather than just having a bigger, beefier, bulkier heat shield. So once I get these, that is when I will be able to do things like send things to the moon and then have a direct return trajectory, throw things at Venus and just shoulder charge into the atmosphere and hope I don't explode. Spoiler alert, I probably will. That sort of thing. So that is a very interesting one that I would probably like. 1965 orbital rocketry is always interesting because, oh my god, look at this. It's just got upgrades, so many upgrades for all sorts of engines that I already have and no new parts. But we're talking the AJ-10 mid, LR-105, LR-87, 3 LR-87s, fascinatingly. LR-89, LR-91, Agena gets a new one, a model 8096. I think that's one of the later versions. Well, obviously it's one of the later versions, but it's one of the more modern ones, which is a pretty cool upgrade. Some Russian upgrades, Vexen engine upgrade. I don't know what a Vexen is, but that's fine. And then another Agena upgrade. Got Agena upgrade and then Agena upgrade. Okay. Oh, because I see. Yeah, so lots of different upgrades that we have available in 1965. That is where, every one of these years is now going to be like where a certain engine really comes into its own. I'm not sure which one is in 1965, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it's a bunch of them. Then that leads to 1966, where I finally get another H1 upgrade. I'm very excited about that. Bigger, better Hydrolox engines. I get the absolute glorious J2, which, I mean, that's starting to look like we're getting Saturn pieces. Backing up a little bit, like that's digging into the future. We still have some of these rocket upgrades to get to before we worry about that too terribly much. We're working on these upgrades now. Lunar era exploration materials science is a very interesting one because that's getting us an integral structure tank upgrade. And integral structure is something that I can actually like force myself to use from time to time over balloon tanks. So that would be probably useful. Service module tank, that's probably useful. The Saturn V launch tower, very cool. I'm very interested in getting more science, so we might actually want to focus that a little bit. Yeah, I actually like this idea. So we're going to go with Advanced Capsules Era Electronics Research, which is going to unlock some science stuff. So that'll get us Interplanetary Era Science, which I would like to focus on because that gets us a whole bunch more experiments, some like actual parts and some that we can actually add to probes, which will be good because we are due for new science. It's giving us this notice, but once again, that is something that is not going to actually happen until we unlock this node. So that's really cool. Early life support might be good. Why don't we upgrade our communications also? Because we can do power generation and we can do communications all in one and still have enough for something else. Yeah, so we'll do power generation, which allows us to get fuel cells, like actual external fuel cells, fuel cell arrays, that sort of thing, which will, it consumes, looks like liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So I guess they are life support resources, fair enough. But these are a possibility for powering vessels without using solar panels, which is an interesting thing. I'm looking forward to finally getting RTGs so that I can start sending probes deeper into the solar system, because anything further out than Mars, you're really not going to be able to do much with solar panels, because even at Mars, we are at half power consumption, or half power production, I should say, which is not great. and it's hampering our ability to send things out into the solar system. Okay, so, and that leaves us with improved communications, which I will also get because that is that's a helpful thing as well. Having better, more powerful communications allows us to use less power on our existing comm stations because the deep space network gets beefier every time you upgrade on this track. So there we go. We are moving forward on science. We have 760,000 funds, but I don't know that we're 100% ready to unlock this yet. So let's take a look at missions first. So now we are being asked to get a vehicle into an orbit of Venus that is scientifically useful, which I suppose mine wasn't. Darn it. A maximum apogee of 30. Mine actually is in this orbit. It's in an orbit very similar to this, but you need to launch a new vessel, so is what it is. I unlocked this by getting into Venus orbit, so it's not like I could have done both at the same time. That's fine. But I think now that I'm working on larger launch vehicles, I should be able to start doubling up on some of these, which will be really helpful. Like doing the Venera thing where I have a lander and an orbiter in one would be fabulous. That would be a really helpful thing. Because if I could get like atmospheric probe, lander, and science probe orbiter in around Venus in one go, that's like, let's see, that's almost 1 million. That's like 600,000. Another 500,000. Yeah, that's like 2.75 million funds right there for one mission, possibly. So that would definitely be worth doing. So yeah, I'm going to be looking into building more complicated, heavier missions in the future. I've been kind of running very lean up till now, but I have the 350-ton pad. So it's definitely time for me to start making that stuff happen. I've been gently reminded that RP-1 is all about balancing on the razor's edge of aggressively accepting contracts and making sure that you can actually pass your missions. So I need to lean a little bit more into the aggressiveness, I think is what I was being told there. Ooh, look at that. Yeah, so these are orbital flight with maneuvers and 2+ crew. So these are more complicated missions with 2-person crews. This is for Gemini, obviously. But these are longer orbit durations with maneuvers and a little bit more complicated, but these are 300,000 funds a piece. So that's, a pretty good thing to just be running all the time in the background, and much better than the 100,000 that I was getting on one crew flights. Okay, I think before I get myself all excited and upgrade my vehicle assembly building, I want to spend a little bit more money on upgrading my science. So we are just going to get another 19 points, we'll say, and plow all of that into research and development, getting us up to about 160 points in R&D, which means that now with the multiplier on the new facility and everything else, we are now researching the largest nodes in just 100 days, and everything else is a lot lower than that. So we want to move a little bit faster into better tech, because I've felt a little bit stymied. Like I felt like I've been in this era for a really long time because I've just been launching a lot of missions because my vehicle assembly building is cranking things out. So I've been stuck with the same technology forever and ever. So it's time to really focus on upgrading our science so that we can really get moving on more interesting missions. So we have now our next astronaut. I have just hired Lisa Kim, who's going to retire in 1976 as my first non-pilot astronaut. She is going to be a scientist that we are going to hopefully use to do a lot of really good work on the Gemini program. So I'm trying to think ahead about what we'll need for that, and I was just really trying to find someone who had low stupidity. Like, I wish that wasn't what I had to do, although it looks like the numbers are a little bit better. I'm not rolling quite as high on stupidity, but you want someone with a high bar on courage, low bar on stupidity, and also looking at the names and so forth. I'm generally trying to be a little bit more American a little more USA centric with my names. Try not to hire too many Russians. Not that it matters in any way whatsoever, but I can say Lisa Kim is a name that I can say very easily. It is not hard for me to. It would be a lot harder for me to mess that up than it would be Victoria Zimmermana. I would have to like pause on that one every time. So I'm going to hire the Lisa Kim instead. And that is how we're going to do that. So yeah, we have a scientist, and now it's time to start thinking about training a little bit. Because, let's see, astronauts. I've got Johnny Flores working on mission training for another Mercury mission. It's going to be kind of my last send-off. I'm going to attempt to do that rendezvous for no benefit except for the sake of doing it. Although I did take... That's not true. I'm completely lying. I took a orbital flight 1 crew contract that only requires me to be in orbit for 9 hours. So I figure I can use those 9 hours to plan out my my rendezvous, and then still have plenty of time to actually execute it, get to the satellite, and return safely before all of the supplies run out. So that's something we're going to be doing while I'm working on Gemini. And speaking of Gemini, Valerie Dunn is training for proficiency in Gemini, and that is going to take, I think it was like 500 or so days, like a ridiculous amount of time, actually. So we're working on that now, and that is going to hopefully have her ready to pilot a Gemini craft by the time I actually get one ready, because we're a little ways off. We have... let's see, 90, 100, 200, so like almost a year, not quite a year, to get to second generation capsules. So it's going to be a little bit longer even after that I've got my contracts all settled out and everything else. So, and the rocket that we're going to be using to launch the Gemini, test it, etc. So I'll probably do like an uncrewed mission just to test out the Gemini capsule and all that. So yeah, hopefully it should be in about as much time, but I also probably should have gotten this training done sooner. Astronaut training is something very easy to forget about, and it doesn't cost you anything except for a click. So it's a little bit of a, kind of a fiddly feature. I like the idea that I have to deal with training, and then that my astronauts need to be trained, and it provides a kind of implicit cost to astronauts and losing them, potentially, because if I lose someone who's had to undergo 2 years of training and also has skill levels, that's a big loss, like in terms of gameplay, as well as like the role playing of like, oh no, we've lost an astronaut and it's a terrible blow to the space program, and the president is mad at me and all that stuff. So anyways, Lisa Kim is going to need some kind of training. I still don't know what general aviation is. I think I'm just not going to worry about it this time and see if it changes anything. And we're going to put Lisa Kim into the 525-day Gemini training program. Boop. And there we go. So she is now getting ready to be our second Gemini pilot, which I've managed to have my first class of astronauts be 1 male, 2 female. So that's pretty cool. So as you can see, we have a little bit more money, and I have accepted a few contracts. We have the other 2 Combach satellites heading up to orbit soonish. This one's going to be done within the day. I've got another surveyor craft that is going to be heading up to land on the moon using the same old architecture. I thought about redesigning that, but I realized that there's not a whole lot of point. So this is the third of 5 of these, and there's really not a whole lot of incentive for me to change up that those mission parameters, because this works, and there's nothing that I'm not doing. Like that's been the biggest thing for me. Like that's why I've been so kind of like, I don't want to say stagnant, but that's why I've had the same launchers and the same probes over time, is because I haven't had any mission parameters that has required me to go above and beyond that. So I can get this, and there's no science that I'm not doing. There's no like actual sample that I can return until I get manned missions out to the moon, and that is a whole different thing. So yeah, there's not a whole lot that I'm not doing that I could be doing. Except for like returning from the moon, but I'm still waiting on lunar rated heat shields and blah blah blah. So anyways, all that to say, I'm gonna just run a couple more of these. There is one more. So there's lunar rovers that I could do, which I'm not sure I have good wheels for yet, but that's something that I could do that would be fun. But that would require more mass. And then lunar landing and sample return, like I said, that requires heat shields, but is also otherwise relatively doable at this point. I've had to finally design for this mission a more advanced, heavier booster, which I'm really excited to show you guys, but that's going to be a little bit further down the way when I actually, need it. For lunar missions for now, until I get heat shields or manned capsules, there's nothing new and exciting to do. So all that to say, I have not updated my surveyor craft at all, so we're going to be just launching another one of those moon landing missions that is direct descent and makes my palms sweat a bunch. Then we have our Mercury telemission, which is going to be Johnny Flores going up to rendezvous with a satellite. The other combox, and then finally Scanner 1, which is where I'm going to unveil one of my 2 new launch vehicles. Yeah, and so also things to think about for future missions. We have Intrepid 6, which is coming up, so I'm going to be doing the maneuvers on that one once that enters into Mars's sphere of influence. Mission training for our astronauts, and then I've put in transfer windows for basically every body that I have a contract available for right now. So that's Mercury, Vesta, Jupiter, Venus, Ceres? How do I pronounce that? Ceres, not Sears. Sorry about that. So the other transfer window to Mars. And this is I actually did a little bit more than just opening up transfer window planner to get an estimation. I actually plotted out a very particular type of transfer for each one of these that I really hope that I'll remember when we get to it. Like I actually picked out a particular transfer date that I can then recreate using MechJeb when I get there with the particular things in mind. Like, for example, this next Mars transfer window is the low energy one that I can use to get into orbit. Same thing with Venus, with the idea that I'm going to be probably sending out a, what do you call it? An atmosphere probe and a lander and all that sort of thing. And these are all just direct transfer windows. Like, I keep wanting to do like a Mercury by way of Venus transfer, but I haven't figured out how to do it yet because the flyby planner tool that I've looked at, flyby finder, is incredibly complicated, and I haven't figured out how to translate what I get in results from that actually into the game. There is a primer that is about 1.5 miles long that I will throw myself into studying more, but for now I have a launcher that can actually, I think, get to every single one of these planets with just tossing a tiny probe past it, which honestly is all we really need to do right now. Like, there's so much you can do with a little 300 kilogram, 200 kilogram probe, and it's not hard to build a launch vehicle to just hurl that 1600 meters per second in delta V. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I have lots of big plans and gravity assists and things like that I'm going to be doing in the future, but for now, let's move on. Oh, I almost forgot. The other thing is I have 480,000 funds, so I should probably spend some of that. I've got a big tracking station upgrade coming up very... not soon. Not soon? Soonish? Eventually? Eventually. Long enough that I don't have to worry about it. Wow, it's way out the bottom. Never mind. Yeah, so I don't have... Let's see. We're going to want to get an astronaut upgrade if we want to do EVAs, so that's something we're going to need to do during the Gemini program, so that's something to think about very seriously for very soon. We just upgraded our research and development, but the next upgrade is going to be 2 million, and that's going to be what we need for 100 science nodes, and also upgrading the astronaut complex, or it's one of those tandem upgrades. So I need that and the astronaut complex upgrade to get EVA surface samples. So I would need both of these for that. So that's something we're going to need not as soon as we're going to need the astronaut complex upgrade. Haven't, like, taking more than 7 contracts at a time sounds like a recipe for disaster and or danger. Tracking station, yep, that's going to be that upgrade that we get later on. VAB, like, I'm just about ready for this. Like, I'm very ready, but I'm really wanting to crank up my science right now, so I'm not actually feeling the crunch on vessel production. And finally, just out of curiosity, what does the next rocket pad cost? 500,000. Woof. Okay, well, that's fine. I haven't even launched a 350-ton launcher vehicle yet, so I don't think I need to start working on the next one. But I do have some in mind, finally. So yeah, so that's basically it for my upgrades. I'm thinking very seriously about this one. This is probably the next thing I'm going to pull the trigger on, and then I'm going to want to get the astronaut complex upgraded. I think all this flyby cash that we're going to get is really going to fund a huge amount of our Gemini program in the next year. Like, we're going to get a lot of good facility upgrades out of just chucking tiny probes at distant planets, which will be a lot of fun. So all that to say, I think it's time to spend a whole bunch of money on KCT points. So I'm going to just drop myself down to about 100,000. I think that's safe. And then I'm going to go really all in on research and development. And now that we are about even, I'm going to now just kind of keep them even. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. So now we are at 178 points in VAB and R&D, which means that our technologies that we're researching in 100 days are now researching in 90, which is pretty good. And our rockets are finishing, even the biggest ones are finishing in 56 days, which is pretty good. Like, not great, but pretty good. That allows us to get a lot of missions done in a relatively short amount of time. We're getting lots of points in science from our Venus orbiter. So we can see Intrepid 6 is around the sun, Intrepid 5 is around Venus, and this guy has given us 72 credits of science, which is just lovely, and that's getting us free upgrade points, which I love, so more R&D. And yeah, we actually have science to spend now. So for all I've been complaining about lunar-rated heat shields, I think I need to prioritize that and probably move it way up the list, because I need it terribly, apparently. Because if I want to, like, put a probe into a descent trajectory, if I want to do like an atmosphere probe around Venus and coming in from interplanetary speeds, I'm probably going to need at least a lunar-rated heat shield, right? Like, I'm not sure how I could get away with less than that. And this also looks like this has a bunch of the rover wheels. Yeah, because there's no rover wheels here, but there are rover wheels in this node. So yeah, we want to prioritize lunar-rated heat shields so that we can actually bring stuff back from the orbit of the moon. So I'm going to move that up. Let's just do that right now while I'm thinking about it, because there's a lot of stuff in my science you can see. Move this up, move it up, move it up, move it up. Up, 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 up. Yeah, right after, no, even before second gen capsules, I think. I'm wondering. No, we'll do it after second gen capsules. So there's going to be some time that we're going to want to be working on heat shields. We're going to want the capsules up as relatively as soon as possible. I've got docking procedures and landing up next, because those are going to give me really important engines and fuel upgrades that I'm going to use for better landing designs, which is why I haven't stressed about improving my surveyor. But then we are really going to want to get to these heat shields, for goodness sake, because I have had so much trouble getting things back from the moon. I think I spent an entire day this weekend just messing around with designs, trying to get a lunar sample land and return, but I was trying to do it on like a 150-ton launch vehicle, and so yeah, obviously that was not going to work. I looked at the RP-1 Discord and be like, what are people doing that I'm not doing? It's like, oh, they're launching 700-ton vehicles to do it. Got it. That makes way more sense. So yeah, I'm just going to put off certain designs and not caveman it until I actually have the proper designs for them. All right, so that is going to have to do it for us this time. We got a lot done this time. We got a probe landed on the moon using a advanced technique that was able to save us a lot of mass on the departure stage. We got into orbit around Venus with a very much a minimum viable product there, and then I spent way too long talking about research and plans and organizing all those other things that we'll be doing for the future. So, yeah, we got a lot more to do. We are looking at a communication satellite here that we will be talking about next time. I got a lot to say about that orbit and so forth. But if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Leave me a comment. I do love hearing from you all, and I will see you next time.